Welcome to the Haven Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by Haven, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Haven Hubcast. I'm your host, Nancy Sheed, and we have a very special guest joining us today. I'd like to welcome Dominique Johnson. She is the Connecticut State Representative of the 143rd District here in Connecticut, which, as I've just learned, covers a bunch of Norwalk and a little bit of Westport. Welcome, Dominique.
Thank you, Nancy. Great to be with you today.
I am excited to have you here. And a lot of times we talk about people's careers and their trajectories and, how they got into where they are. So before we jump into sort of what you're currently doing, I'd love to go back and say, did you always dream of being in politics, Dominique?
No, that's a definitive no. I did not. There's a longer story to that, but the short answer is no. So here I am doing this work and really enjoying it and feeling like I have a lot to bring to the work for my neighbors. But when I was in high school and junior high, I thought I was going to be a violinist. So that's quite a different situation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you still play?
I do once in a while. I really don't have the time, but I did.
Okay.
It was nice. A friend who does a folk show at the Westport VFW, now the Boathouse in Westport, invited me to jam last summer. I couldn't say no, but it was a lot to learn a lot of songs and to do that. So I wish I could get back into it more, but I just don't have the time. But it's so fun playing music with other people.
But that was your guiding thing back in high school, it sounds like.
It was. Even into college. I was in slight denial in college that was not going to be my career, fundamentally because it's wild to think about it now, but I spent so much of my time playing the violin and the viola in high school that I developed an injury similar to what baseball players and particularly pitchers develop. So it was just not going to be sustainable physically. So I had to pivot and do something else. But for a while, I really tried to keep in there and do both things, really stay with music. But I've always found ways to keep it in my life. But now it really pretty much is listening to a lot of music on my drive to Hartford. So,
okay, well,
yeah,
and that's okay. Music is still part of your life.
It's still a part of my life. Yes.
So if you don't mind, keep taking us on that journey with you when it became that wasn't sustainable. What does a budding violinist do? Does one say, here's the second thing I'm interested in? Or do you seek advice from somebody? How did that next step play out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that brings me all the way back to the idea of, well, if not this, then what do I do? And at some point, fortunately that meant for me, I could go to college. I went to a school I felt that could really give me the opportunity to figure out then what would I want to become, if not this, again, while kind of really trying to stay in both worlds. And because of that, I discovered all of a sudden, I said, wow, okay, I really enjoy thinking analytically. I enjoy, strangely, applying a lot of things you learn as a musician, about how to make sense of a lot of different inputs at once and see how they all work together and then try to create solutions to problems like that. It was all the groundwork was all there, but I just had to figure out that meant that I would be really interested in eventually what I did was I became a social scientist. And I, ironically, even though I swore I wouldn't, I started doing work in statistics, which was never fun for me. So, but I powered through and I did it.
Wow. I think you might have heard my stomach go, what? Oh, statistics. That's very impressive.
Yeah, no,
okay.
I would, using statistics in any of my work and then becoming a politician are the two unlikely curveballs in my life. So there you go. Yeah.
And speak a little bit about, you said at some point we were talking earlier, where did sort of negotiation and conversation, to you, was that just studying things, or it sounded like you wanted to be a little more active as well in terms of being a social scientist, in terms of making things happen, not just studying them? So how did that translate into what kind of the work you were actually doing?
It's true. That's what I found, is that for me, I wanted to be a policy-based social scientist where we really focused on very practical fields. So for me, that became education because I really wanted to focus on young people and youth and their experiences particularly in school with bullying and other forms of victimization. So I wanted to try to figure out how could we unlock some of the factors that were leading to these experiences so that we could help make it better for them and ideally remove those from their school environments. But that is to say, all of this is a lot of math, which I didn't anticipate coming, but also it's a lot of thinking about how complex these situations can really be and how many factors are always at play, and then trying to figure out what can be some root causes. So it really helped me to, in many ways, drill down, which I used a lot of this work to kind of inform later as a consultant to help nonprofits. Like, how do you really go down to root causes of things you're experiencing to try to do what you're doing better and try to really isolate where the most impactful areas for your intervention could be. So that's a lot of what I tried to do as a social scientist. It seems like forever ago. I mean, I wrote articles, I did all the research, I was a tenure track professor, but it does seem like a lifetime ago. Yeah.
And you mentioned nonprofits. So at what point is your point? Did that long time ago? Did that, as we said, what was the next part of your journey in connecting all these dots? Was that when you ended up in nonprofits?
Definitely that led to it. I think about 10 years ago, I was teaching at a college in New Jersey and the commute was just starting to really get a little too daunting. We had moved to Connecticut not that long before, about 2 years before that. And I fundamentally started thinking about how I could apply my skill set because I was starting to do some subcontracting, for educational institutions. But I just felt like I wanted to kind of be a part of things on the ground. That's what led me to trying to work with some organizations to do this kind of work. I really also love not having to commute, an hour and a half one way. That was great. So
exactly.
Trying to make my home base in Connecticut. And as a result, I started teaching at some institutions here and really enjoyed, I always enjoy working with students. So that in many ways is what keeps me going now that I am on these committees, two of which really focus on education. So I'm lucky that I can bring my experiences working with particularly college students to that work too. So,
and it sounds like getting you a little bit out of your theory and study box and into action focused, but kind of action focused or seeing things in real time versus just in terms of analytics. Is that a fair statement as to what was also going on?
Absolutely. I think back and there's like a couple articles I wrote that were helpful ironically, to state legislators. This time it was in California when they were trying to figure out a textbook-based law. I don't believe the law passed, but it was so interesting to realize that, wow, my research could be used by a court or by somebody who's making a decision about what kind of policy to implement. And so now that I'm that person, I know how important good objective information can be. And I think, to your point, I always, some of my colleagues back in the day thought I was too practice focused, because it's like I wasn't theoretical enough. But so it depends what group you're in. But now I feel like, yes, it's totally fabulous to live in the world of actual real world practice. But knowing some of the theories behind why things might happen is always an interesting thing to have in the back of my mind.
Right. Your crowd is relevant. You're like, well, wait, I can see action now from this policy. I was like, I don't want to study it. Well, keeping up with that in politics still not even resonating with you quite yet. What was kind of this runway into getting into, and maybe this is it, the sort of getting to see policy turn into action. What was your journey into sort of finally either stepping into the ring, raising your hand, or saying yes, having been asked? Because I think that's also interesting for people who didn't aspire to it, but suddenly come into it. I know there is actually typically, not a typical way it happens, but there's kind of an aha, and or somebody else sees an aha in you and wants to support you in doing something. So do you mind sharing that story?
Oh, not at all. I think that I might have had a little bit of both because ever since I was in high school, like specifically junior year of high school, I remember starting being active around certain issues, right? It was this kind of fire lit in me about seeing something wrong and knowing that I wanted to be part of fixing it. Right. And I think, if I really had to look back, I'm remembering the mid to late 90s during that time. And I think the big social issue for me at that point was HIV AIDS and watching what was happening in society around that and thinking that there were some things that really struck a chord in me about justice or fairness. So fast forward, like that got me into the idea of you could be an advocate and an activist for issues. And then I remained that way and was fundamentally not really seeing politics as a means for change until I volunteered for a presidential campaign and was one of the data nerds in the boiler room. And it was an amazing experience, but it also opened the door for like, well, I think maybe if this could be a vehicle for us getting some large scale change that could be positive. But then, life gets in the way. You have work, you have family. And then I remember becoming involved locally in community groups on a nonprofit board here in Norwalk. And I was a big advocate. This was around like 2017 or 18, a big advocate of like, we need more women in our offices here in Norwalk, right? Our council at the time only had 3 women serving on it out of 15 people. So a friend and I in the parking lot after one of the meetings, which is always, the parking lot conversations are always with your friends, always lead to good stuff. And so that's what, so that's what happened. And we just,
after any committee meeting, there's the parking lot conversation.
The parking lot. And that's what, so we were like, what do we do? How do we get more women to run? And eventually the question gets asked of you. And it's true what they say in my experience, like if enough people ask you, especially as a woman, it takes far more time, I don't know. I've heard the number 7. Like it takes you 7 times to be asked to finally say yes. And somebody saw in me what, like, I do know there were a couple women who saw in me that I could do this and that I could be a value add for our community. And so I'm lucky in that it wasn't a totally foreign concept to me because I had worked on a campaign, but then it also, you have to have some people who believe in you because otherwise it seems like there's more gatekeeping than you would think, right? Obviously. So, but then it kind of it really did fast track. And I'm at some point still, astonished in many ways that who preceded me in this seat went on to become our Secretary of State after only 1 term. And it was only because of that the seat was even open. But again, like people were encouraging me to run for it. And then here I am 2 years later, and I've been able to really help shape some important things in our community. And I think that it's nice in many ways that I feel as though, going around door to door and talking to people in the community, you really get a sense of what people want you to focus on. And I'm happy that a lot of that syncs up with what I think I can really contribute to as well. So
it's been fun to hear you connect the dots, right? Like we talked about playing the violin and seeking harmony, right? Like being an activist and studying numbers. Like I would think it sounds like it all boils up to being where you are and being recognized for that. If we can, let's talk, you've been in office. You obviously have some sort of like pillars and things that, as you just alluded to, that you believe in, that you've also heard from your constituents are important. You've mentioned women. You've mentioned kind of standing up for those who maybe don't have a voice. Can you share with us, do you have a guiding principle as to what's important to you and your constituents and related to sort of how that's playing out in the committees you sit on or your actual on the ground work?
I think guiding principles for me are making sure I listen to people. I know that I'm representing my neighborhood and a greater district, that just knowing my own neighborhood, but also knowing the community and getting to know a lot of people, we generally are focused on quality of life. We're focused on educational opportunities for the young people in our community. And especially in Westport, there's a real focus on sustainability. Not to say Norwalk doesn't also have that, but I've noticed that more prominently in the part of my district that's Westport for sure. And I think that in so doing, I think it's been really important. I want to help get things done, right? I want to work with purpose and intention, and I'm a doer in that way, even though I was trained to be a thinker. So I think leading with my heart and at the same time as knowing that this is politics and not activism was a switch I had to really wrestle with when I was on my council for 3 years preceding this. This is about working in collaboration with people. This is about, and the compromise is inherent to the process. It can be excruciatingly to some people, excruciatingly slow, the process of change. And I think in some ways that prevents us from doing things in a rash way, or you're swinging back and forth to these extremes. But I also think that now that I've seen and been a part of actually the process of creating and negotiating and legislating very bipartisan policies, I really see how being a coalition builder is a huge asset to the work, especially for my constituents. I want people to feel heard, even if we disagree even deeply on one or two policies. I hope that people know that I want to listen to what they have to say and try the best I can to make sure their voice is heard, even in some part of that process. Even if the bill doesn't go the way that they want, at the end, there are ways that we can put our district stamp on it through the process. So that, to me, building coalitions, making sure you work with other people, you build the relationships and you listen to each other, I think would be the guiding North Star of the work for me.
That segues beautifully into you talking about being a neighbor and, Haven being one of your neighbors and in a community where I like to think we also strive for that in terms of working together and collaboration and everything else. You mentioned sustainability and you've mentioned women. Those are obviously very important things to just sort of the values of Haven. And you've been a friend of Haven. Can you kind of share what you've experienced through either your time at Haven or how Haven's supporting doing work that's of interest to you or vice versa? I love to sort of hear, when people in your position come in and say, oh, getting to see things in real life at Haven, as well as how it's affecting women, how it's affecting work, how it's affecting small businesses, how it's affecting sustainability.
And for me, Haven is like just at the center of all of that, which makes its work so exciting and important to me as somebody who cares deeply about women's economic mobility, because I know that lifts up all of our families. It's someone who cares deeply about education and workforce development, not just because of my background before I did this for my other professional life, but just because of how important that is for the health of our families, our society, our economy. Haven's at the center of all this to me. And I think what's truly exciting is the model of collaboration and especially focus on B Corps. This past session, so two things I've done in workforce development they literally are intricately tied to sustainability. So the first was the Green Jobs Corps bill. And I came and talked a little bit about that at Haven last year. The second was the workforce development, small business entrepreneurship, small family farms, and business incentives section of a priority climate bill that did not pass, but I was really proud to work on that, be one of the leads and co-write that with our policy staff. And to me, that truly is where I think we're going to see, and I feel deeply that is where we're going to see some of the most impactful work in sustainability, is to empower our startups. Like, for example, young people who want to come to the state and do a climate tech startup, or women who have deep ties in their own communities who want to do sustainability work in some way, zero waste, startup, anything that they want to do. We should be really empowering people to do this. And so I think that those incentives are things I really want to keep working on and fighting for. I mean, when the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA, comes and testifies that these are good ideas, I think we're onto something. And when you see it in practice, like what you all do at Haven, I think this is a blueprint for what we can do to really make that, we're kind of a small state, but I think that really great things can happen when you have small networks of people who can really collaborate with one another and create these big impacts. And so I see that as Haven being this great example of that. And frankly, as we know, and you all know way better than I, a lot of the climate tech space is still a little, I think women entrepreneurs and their time to shine in that space is yet to come. And I think we're on the cusp of it, but we just have to be willing to really invest and work on these collaborations between government, industry, education, and small business and entrepreneurs. So
I love how you pulled all those pieces together. And my comment, you said small networks. I think what we're also finding in these conversations and in this collaboration is that these networks actually end up being so much deeper and richer and larger because of the collaboration. And I mean, whether that's literally sitting in a co-working space or it's sitting up at Hartford with you and you're, introducing people, or I know a person, and so that collaboration and growing networks, I think, is also a huge part of how we're operating together in this capacity. Dominique, if people want to connect with you or learn more about your work or see you when you're when you're not in Hartford, what's the best way for them to find you and learn more?
There's two ways. You can just look me up on my official page and get in touch with me that way. And I would be super happy to meet with people when luckily we're not in session, so I'm home all the time now. And it's wonderful because I get to be in the community. And then secondly, social media, like I do have an official account and a more personal account. So Dominique Force DT is that more personal account, campaign account. But you can hit me up on social media, State Rep Johnson, or on any of my pages, dominiquejohnson.org, I believe is my website. And also you can find me at some of my favorite spots around Norwalk and Westport if I am around. Just
okay.
Love to talk. So
perfect. Well, we'll include all those links in the show notes.
Oh, great. Okay.
I really appreciate you taking time to chat with us today and hear more about the work you're doing and how it's impacting those of us in your neighborhood and in the state of Connecticut. So thank you so much for your time. And we hopefully will see you again soon at Haven.
I plan on it. Oh, hopefully very, very soon for some of the more great, I think what you all are doing around sustainability. This year I'll be back to be a part in any way I can, and appreciate you, Nancy. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And that's another episode of the Haven Hubcast. We will be back again soon. If you like what you hear, please share it with friends, give us a rating, or make sure you've subscribed on your favorite podcast app.
Thanks for listening to the Haven Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Haven is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. Haven is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the Haven community online at haven.com. That's HAYVN.com. Haven Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.